For the first time in our 275-year history, a 30-year-old isn't doing as well as his or her parents.
65% of middle-class Americans said they were struggling financially.
It is harder for the average person to live in the U.S. Prices are going through the roof.
Gen Z job seekers should be willing to work for free.
People that shut down their laptop at 5, 9 to 5 only, they don't work for me.
These young people need to understand, work harder, stop blaming others, blame yourself.
2 years ago, I made a video on quiet quitting, and I talked about how Gen Z is coming up in a tougher economy than what their parents and their grandparents faced when they were coming up. And since I made that video, the economy has gotten worse, not just for Gen Z, but for the working class as a whole.
American Airlines flight attendants say they're sleeping in cars because they can't afford the cost of living.
75% of middle-income families say they are actively cutting back on non-essential expenses. 73% finding it difficult to save for the future.
I have had to reduce all non-essential spending. I have gotten one haircut because it just got out of control, and that's it. That's all that I can afford.
If you kids can't live comfortably on $20 an hour, you have to be overspending. If you make $20 an hour in 2024, that is $40,000 a year. After taxes, that is $2,750. The average one-bedroom apartment and utility is going to run you $2,000. You cannot do that making $20 an hour, so you're going to have to rent with a roommate for about $1,200, and that's being conservative. $500 a month for groceries, which is less than $150 a week. $300 for a student loan payment, which is below average. $300 for a car payment, which is below average, $150 for car insurance, $150 for gas, $100 for personal care, $50 for a cell phone is $2,750. That is paycheck to paycheck. This is the cost of living in America in 2024.
What you just saw there is how much money you need to survive in America today. $45,000 and you're not really surviving. You're month to month, and the more expensive that things get, you're not going to be able to keep up with those expenses because you're paycheck to paycheck. If you make $60,000, you might be able to bank about $300 a month, but when you look at the average annual salary in America, it's $60,000 a year. Again, that counts in the old people, 50, 60, that are making good wages with the young people. So when you look at this, you start to understand why young people are so frustrated with this economy. Most people are actually drowning in debt and they're moving backwards.
Is this something you would have thought that you would have heard 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago? Would you have thought this is something that you would hear coming out of the United States? Some blame corporate greed. I blame government malfeasance. Some would even say they wanted this to happen.
I think if we're going to try and protect the American dream and keep it accessible for not only Gen Z, but future generations to come, this thing that Americans pride themselves on, the American dream, this thing that the U.S. government uses to get immigrants in here, to raise our population. If we're going to keep that alive, I think we need to take a good, hard look at how did we get to where we're at right now, where the American dream seems to be the furthest away that it's been since maybe the Great Depression. How did we get here and what do we need to do? And I think one of the first steps in doing that is looking at our economic model. There's really three parties in America's economy. You've got employees, the government, and business. And when you look at those three parties, employees are earning less than ever, right? The cost of living is so high, so maybe dollar-wise we're earning a similar amount. But when it comes to inflation and what that money is actually worth, employees are earning less money. But when you look at the government and big business, those guys are earning more money than ever before. Now, I want to clarify, I'm not somebody who's anti-business. I believe in capitalism. It creates a lot of innovation. But the system that we have in the US right now is not true capitalism, and it's not a true democracy. Because what you've got is a lot of big business, these people with lots of resources financially, they're able to pay to get the politicians in to support the campaigns and the policies that benefit them. And in turn, the politicians get more power when they take money from business. And so what you have is the government getting more powerful, collecting more resources, and then businesses, they get more powerful because they get the policies that they want passed. I know this is nothing new, but even when you look at something as basic as unions, more unions equal less profit at the very top 1% and more of that profit being shared among workers. It's almost a direct correlation over time between how much money the working class has and union participation. So you have to look at this and go, where there's been a lot of anti-union legislation passed, that's big business having an influence. Or even when you look at the business model of somebody like Blackrock, that's a business model that doesn't add a lot of value to the economy when they're doing things like buying up residential real estate and then renting it out. Maybe that creates shareholder value, but they're not actually creating a product for the economy, but a business model like theirs where they buy up all of these residential homes that's able to flourish under a government that doesn't want to check them because they get checks from them.
This is deeply concerning. Watch this. This is what the investors like BlackRock and others used to invest in homes, you know, all these other things. And the orange is low price homes they would buy. Green is mid price. Blue is high price. Look at the one they're buying. They don't care about mid price. They don't care about high price. They're buying low price. 1 out of every 4 low price homes is owned by an investor like BlackRock. You think they're buying it because they want to flip? No. They're not trying to flip. They're trying to say, we're in a rental season, guys. Forget about buying a house. Just come and rent from us. We're going to keep this long term.
So when you start to look at America through this lens, you realize that we're no longer a capitalist system. We're no longer the meritocracy that we were in the past, because big business, who has so much money, who has so many assets, and then government, who has so much power, they're essentially in bed working together, minimizing each other's risks so that they can't lose this game, right? So big business will go to government and say, look, don't make any policies against us and we'll keep giving money to your campaign. The campaign says, okay, yeah, just keep the money coming. We'll let you guys keep winning. And what they're doing is they're squeezing the juice out of the middle class. If you look at charts on this, the middle class in America has been in decline for years. And already we're seeing that a lot of the young working class, Gen Z, does not have any more money that we can be squeezed for. We are as paycheck to paycheck as possible. Are we supposed to start walking to work in America where things are 50 miles apart? It's not realistic. And so you look at the system and you have to say, they have rigged this to make sure that they will always continue to win this game. And this idea of the American democratic meritocracy is no longer functioning like it used to.
For the first time in our 275-year history, a 30-year-old man or woman isn't doing as well as his or her parents. And that may not sound like a big deal, but I think that's essentially the social compact breaking. And it creates rage and shame. I mean, what do you want? You want to play by the rules, you want to work hard, and then the ultimate outcome is your kids are going to do as well or better than you. The average 70-year-old is 72% wealthier than they were 40 years ago. The average person under the age of 40 is 24% less wealthy. I believe that almost every major economic policy in the US is nothing but a thinly veiled transfer of wealth from young to old, from the entrants to the incumbents. 2 biggest tax deductions, capital gains and mortgage interest. Who owns stocks and homes? People my age. Who makes their money from current income and rents? Young people. Oh, and then the ultimate intergenerational wealth transfer in the history of the planet was, I have an idea, under the auspices of a virus, 1 million people would be bad, dying would be bad, but what would be tragic is if boomers got less wealthy. So let's come in and flood the market with $5 to $7 trillion in stimulus. 60 to 80% of it, depending on which survey you look at, was not spent. It was saved. It wasn't spent on food or medication. It was saved. People didn't need it. So what happened to that money? It went into the market. And you saw real estate prices go from an average of $290,000 to $410,000 in the US. And then when you couple that with interest rates, the average mortgage has gone from $1,100 to $2,200, meaning that whereas 2/3 of Americans could afford a home, now it's 1/3. So if you owned a home, champagne and cocaine. Look at what's happened to the stock market. Look what's happened to the stock market. It's screamed, right? So it's great if you own stocks. So the entrants have essentially been screwed to keep the incumbents rich. And who's going to have to pay for this stimulus that benefits me? The entrants. It's debt. It's all been debt fueled.
So this is where I have to come back to the government and say, look, you guys know what you're doing. This economic system where you like to pretend, hey, look at your stock prices, look at your portfolio of real estate. It's all going up, right? You guys know that that's fake growth. We haven't had tremendous industry in America to grow the economy for years. Everything's been on the decline, but it seems like real estate and some of these assets continue to go up. Why? Because you're printing money to make everything look fine to the voter base that's going to keep voting you in. They know that baby boomers come out and vote in big numbers. So if we keep their assets expensive, we keep them high, right? So that they can do well. But we do it all off of debt. No one will know the difference. And someday kids will have to come in and they'll have to pay that back. Business in America is not booming like it used to in the 80s, right? Well, we're going to do what we need to do to keep getting elected, even if that system is not sustainable. And so I really do think that we need to get back on the gold standard, because what our politicians have proved to us over the last several decades is that they can't handle having access to unlimited money. And we learn it when we're kids, right? What happens with supply and demand? If you can just print unlimited money, it goes out of whack. The money is essentially useless. It means nothing if they can just be created out of thin air. And so we need to get back on the gold standard. And the government right now is abusing this system at the cost of future generations. Now, the one thing that makes me cautiously optimistic with the situation that we're in right now is that you're starting to see a wave of economic populism in America. You've seen it with people like Trump and some of the people around him, but then you also see it with people like Cenk Uygur at the Young Turks.
Democrats only think in terms of identity, but that's not working anymore. The number one identity people care about is not Latino, black, or white. It's class. Are you going to do something for the average man, or are you going to sit there and play identity politics so you avoid the more important questions that your donors don't want to talk about that actually helps the average guy, like paid family leave and higher wages?
So you start to see a lot of politicians realizing, or a lot of political figures realizing, America is not strong without a strong middle class, right? If you squeeze the orange too much and there's no more juice left, then sure, big business, whatever, you're going to come in here and you're going to try and find ways to make money. But the only thing that people are going to be able to prioritize is the roof over their head, water, and the food in their belly. And if we get to that point, innovation is going to stop in America, and a lot of businesses are going to die. Because what you're seeing with Gen Z right now is that's pretty much where we're at. We have phones, transportation, houses. We have no money for fun. We have no money for, these extra purchases. And if we start to see that across the entire middle class, America's days are numbered, man. And so I am a little bit inspired by this wave of economic populism on the right and a little bit on the left that we're seeing. Hopefully the government realizes, we're not going to have any power if we let our middle class get drained to the point of being non-existent.